So I just watched the uh, Nostalgia Critics review of the Star Wars Holiday Special, and there are several things that I wanted to kind of point out about the Holiday Special in and of itself. Um, First off, it's a holiday special, and what a lot of people who hear about it don't understand is that it isn't a Christmas special, and it wasn't broadcast around Christmas. It was actually broadcast around Thanksgiving. So uh, it can best be called a Thanksgiving special. And back then, Thanksgiving specials weren't that uh, weren't that odd because we didn't consider Thanksgiving like a precursor to Christmas, even though it's only a month ahead of Christmas. It was still considered a separate holiday. Similarly, Jingle Bells, which we associate with Christmas very much, was originally a Thanksgiving song, and Thanksgiving originally took place much closer in a much colder time of the year. It was much more wintry. You would have the fall colors, but you would also have snow on the ground usually way back, and uh, you can largely attribute the fact that we don't have snow starting around November, and nice long winters without a bunch of ups and downs, and hotter longer summers. You can largely attribute all of uh, all of that to global warming. Yeah, so it's unfortunate, but that seems to be the case. Spring and fall are getting shorter. Um, Summer is getting longer. Winter is getting milder. It is global warming. And people complain, oh, well, it's so cold and there's so much snow. That's because it's going to extremes. It's either going very, very hot or very, very cold when it does get cold. Uh, it's the whole ecosystem going out of whack. Uh, and as as late as 25 years ago, it was actually a little bit more imbalanced, but it's actually gotten worse in recent years. And a lot of that, I think, has to do with the fact that China kind of had its economic boom and everybody suddenly had cars instead of riding bikes or trains. And it just didn't get any better. Unfortunately, we didn't explore enough alternative options, and we didn't start planting enough forests back then. Because if we had planted forests back when I was born, they would just if we had planted like a buttload of them back when I was born, which was just after Carter had stepped down and Reagan had stepped in, we would have had, a great many reductions in global CO2 levels. Anyway, back to the Star Wars special. Um, Also, the critic kind of seems to get frustrated and lose it at the fact that the special doesn't have a direct focus. It has a loosely framed outline and then several smaller things to keep your attention. What he's ignoring is that was actually how many specials were structured uh, back in the 70s. That's how a lot of shows were structured, actually. You had variety shows, as they were called, and they were the reality shows of their day. They were the hottest thing. Um, if you think that uh, those kinds of shows are, with reality shows are hot now, variety shows back then were even bigger. People were glued, and they had their shows that they were absolutely loyal to. You had Sonny and Cher, and and Carol Burnett, and even the Brady Bunch had a variety show for a while. After their show went off the air, they actually went ahead and made a variety show with some of the cast. And even Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In was a variety show, and that show's considered a classic by a lot of people. So a good example of the variety show format that was extremely successful for a one-off, that was a holiday show, was the Paul Lynde Halloween special. It featured Witchy Poo and Kiss, and was absolutely off-the-wall bizarre, but it is a lot of fun to watch, and I actually recommend it. It's cheesy and corny, and the whole point of the variety show is that you don't just have to have a sketch or a whole running series of sketches with acts and everything. You have like shorter sketches with a few jokes, and it's kind of good that way. For the Star Wars special, unfortunately, the sketches that they wrote in between, and then the sketches that they wrote for the little cutaways were not that terribly good, but it does at least fit the variety show format. And I think that's kind of why Harvey Korman is featured so much in this, because they probably got him because he was one of the more successful comedy writers of the time. He was one of the more successful comedy actors, so it's entirely possible that he actually wrote a number of the sketches. I don't have the credits in front of me. I'll see about looking them up right now. Okay, I've got it on Wikipedia here. It's coming up. Okay. Oh, well, that explains it. Okay, so you had a number of writers on it, which is fine for a variety show. You want that. But one of the writers was Bruce Vilanch. And for those who don't know, Bruce Vilanch is one of those writers from the 70s who wrote like kind of zany, off-the-wall stuff that kind of mixed genres. The only film that I can recall him being in is Ice Pirates, which was filmed in the 80s, late 70s, early 80s, with Robert Urich, and probably a bunch of other people that nobody else remembers. Although it also has Ron Perlman in it. I've done a review of it. Anyway, so Bruce Vilanch, his whole thing was that he was slightly femmy and very goofy, and but he wasn't like movie star good looking. He was fat and had a beard and curly hair and everything. And the beard and hair weren't a problem for people back then. It was more so his weight that was kind of an obstacle to him being any kind of success as appearing in his own stuff. And plus, on top of that, he couldn't act that well. But just basing that on Ice Pirates. But besides that, he was on television quite a bit, and would usually come up with snappy one-liners for like Hollywood squares and whatever. So I mean, that's not bad, As it is, he wrote some of the stuff, which explains why there's a certain amount of weird comedy. But it's just one of those things where a lot of people don't quite consider it a quality enough show. But the thing is that it's a variety show. You have to look at it in the genre in which it came out. And back then you could do variety show specials for the holidays. As it is, I've seen it, and I don't think it's that bad. Uh, they try and put a lot of genres into it that are interesting and attractive to people for the time. But I think part of the problem is that it was playing very much to its own time, as opposed to the Star Wars films, which, by their edits, were much more timeless. Okay, so for instance, the idea of the used universe, the where everything's kind of dirty and used, and everything's kind of old hat and antiquated, and the only people with anything brand new are this core group of imperial militarists who, get the new stuff because they have all the power, they have all the money, and you're actually on the outskirts of society where things are not always new, and they're not, or if they are new, they aren't as nice as what they have in the wealthier parts of the world, so to speak. So, for instance, on Coruscant, they have all kinds of new stuff all the time. That's where they get all the new stuff. Same thing on Corellia. They have new stuff all the time, and it's exciting. So, what we get is a special that doesn't feature very much Star Wars, but does take place kind of in the Star Wars universe, and does feature certain tertiary characters that were featured in the first film, but not in the but that you didn't really get to know until the second or third films, or until the expanded universe stuff. So, for instance, you actually have the first appearance of Boba Fett until you had the special edition of Star Wars: A New Hope that stuck in the scene where Boba Fett breaks the fourth wall and looks out at the audience. And it looking at that scene, he was a lot cooler, but it's hard to really say, oh, well, the Boba Fett that we meet in Empire is the better Boba Fett. It's the real Boba Fett, compared to the holiday special. But all that considered, I think it actually was decent. As it is, this special takes place between A New Hope and before they started filming for Empire Strikes Back. That being said, it would have actually made more sense to film the special as a precursor to Empire, but we would have that's more from a postmodern sensibility, where we have little precursors and specials leading up to shows all the time. I mean, when the first X-Men movie came out, there was a whole special that they did on Fox where they showed some clips from the movies, and it featured the guy who played the Senator, who was, persecuting mutants and talking all about how they were a menace, and then his daughter stretches her neck up really high. If you get the Star Wars X-Men DVD, it's actually featured on the disc, and it's really not very good. And they gave little hints and clues all throughout that made it pretty obvious that the daughter was upset, and she was hiding the fact that she was a mutant, and presumably she couldn't control her powers or something like that, but neck stretching, that's her power. It was bizarre, and they mentioned nothing of it in the film. You know, they didn't say a word about it in the movie, about how his daughter is a mutant or whatever happened to his his little girl. It's just kind of a weird thing. So it's made just after Star Wars came out, like by a year or two. So on top of that, it looks a little bit weird, um, because by that time Mark Hamill um, had gone back more to his natural blonde, um, or kind of had it touched up a little bit. He'd been tanning, and then they gave him makeup that just accentuated that even more, so that he didn't look as much like, the person that we saw in the first film. Um, and to contrast that, you have Carrie Fisher, who they put back in the buns, and they made even larger to a degree. Um, and of course, they have Harrison Ford back in his Han Solo outfit. But I think what amazes me more about the whole thing is simply the fact that this special was clearly shot in L.A. as opposed to London, where the majority of on-set filming was done. So as a result, you have clearly what's video camera instead of filming it, because back then film was more expensive. You only used film sparingly and for external shots. It was okay, but it tended to give it a weirder, fuzzier look. As it was, they tried to make the Wookiee costumes, other than Chewbacca's, more articulated than Chewbacca's was, because these Wookiees were going to be interacting and acting. But as it is, we're sitting there, and I have to agree with the nostalgia critic on this, we're sitting there and we're watching Wookiees grunt at one another. We're watching them converse, but we aren't in on the conversation. We're supposed to be able to tell from the pantomime exactly what they're doing, but it doesn't work quite as clearly. Also, because of the way they had to make the Wookiees more articulated, in the face department, in the facial area, it tends to actually make them look creepier. For instance, what is the little one? It actually lists them here on the thing. Well, it doesn't matter. Okay. Yeah, Lumpy. Lumpy has like huge eyes that are clearly human, and I can't tell if Lumpy was played by a little person or by a child, but somewhere there was a person in there, and they just decided to let the human eyes come through as much as possible. Now, I don't even know where to start with what went wrong with the Wookiee costumes. Maybe too much hair, whereas with Chewbacca, they actually styled it a bit more. They actually kept it brushed in a certain way, and everything on Chewbacca a little bit better. I mean, in Return of the Jedi, he actually lets it hang forward a little bit, kind of gets the sleepy, just woke up kind of thing, where it's kind of tousled and hanging down, and he's looking so sharp. are Wookiee. But in That makes sense. So, anyway, this video is already way too long, so I'm just going to kind of leave it at that. The Star Wars Holiday Special is not the perfect Star Wars thing, but it was coming right off of a successful film, trying to kind of capitalize on that, and it's just one of those things, unfortunately. George Lucas has tried to kind of squash it out, but it is kind of this underground cult part of the franchise that isn't a bad thing. It's just a different, weird thing that's more timely than what we would be expecting. But when you actually look at when Lucas tries to make a story that is purely Star Wars and purely his own, you end up with the prequels, and they end up not as good. So, anyway, that's all. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.